Hello, viewers, voters, and candidates from the Orange-Washington-Addison House District. Welcome to the White River Valley Herald's second debate of the 2020 election cycle. My name is Dylan Kelley, and I'm a staff writer and photographer here with the White River Valley Herald, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. As you've noticed, we're doing this debate live via the internet, so bear with us if any technical issues transpire during the course of the debate. The questions these candidates are about to answer were submitted by readers of the Herald in both Orange-Washington-Addison districts, as well as those in the broader community. We're going to kick things off right away and let our candidates briefly introduce themselves, beginning with Kevin Doering and then continuing on with the other candidates. So we're going to go straight over to Kevin. Take it away, Kevin.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Kevin Doering. I'm running as an independent for the House seat. My hope is to replace someone like Ben Jickling, who was the last elected person who left a year ago before a appointed position took that place. Ben was a moderate independent thinker. There are many people in Montpelier who tell me they miss Ben and that kind of independent thinking. I think right now in our nation, where we are so divisive, and even in the Vermont legislature, which is civil in tone but is voting consistently 110 to 45, etc., we need more moderate voices. I moved here from Maine 18 years ago. I live in a classic older house. We raised our children here within walking distance and biking to Floyd's and the church and the post office and Little Lake. And I got to do a book on weather history with Mim Herwig. Some of you may remember Mim very well, exceptional person. Why am I running? I kept a promise to my wife after I was elected in Maine as a select board chair that, and on the planning board and several other boards, and was never home when our children were young, that I would not run when I took this job, when I took a job in Vermont, when I moved here. And I've kept that pledge. And one's in college now. In fact, she's zooming a class to California as I speak, and another one has finished college. I'm running because of ABCs: affordability, bringing the economy back; B, and C, creating equity and opportunity for all of our Vermont youth and the people who want to take it in older classes, because we don't have it. Act 60 redistributed money, but it didn't redistribute equity in education. I don't believe in tax increases. I think we can do the things I'm going to talk about without it. I have federal, state, and municipal budget experience, which is why I look forward to working on the budget, which is the biggest issue, the money. And I identify with people who are vulnerable because I lost my job in the recession. I'm still paying loans back when I retrained to get into education. Thank you very much.
All righty, switching now over to Jay Hooper. Jay, you're next. Tell us about yourself and why you're running. Oh, you're muted, Jay.
I'd like to thank you, Dylan, for moderating and for the.
Go for it.
I just unmuted. Are you sure?
Yes, you're good.
Firstly, I'd like to thank you, Dylan, for hosting this evening, and the Herald for putting on this virtual platform that we hope will generate a robust discussion around the issues of today and tomorrow, the greatest issues facing Vermonters. Good evening. My name is Jay Hooper. I represent the 5 towns of Brookfield, Braintree, Randolph, Granville, and Roxbury in the State House. I've served on 2 committees in 2 terms, the House Ag and Forestry Committee, and now the House Education Committee. In 2016, when I graduated from Connecticut College as a double major in history and government, I decided that since there was an open seat in my home district in Vermont, where I moved back here to, I would run for it because, frankly, ever since George Bush Jr. Was in office, I remember observing how Americans have grown more and more wary of government, and there's a serious lack of trust in government on most levels. And I said to myself, if I can cultivate the same type of leadership that I did in high school, in my later years in high school, I have a feeling I could be a pretty strong leader in state government if I am true to my commitment to being a trustworthy government actor, which I think I've done so far. So I'm running for re-election. I hope that tonight you'll consider my stances as worthy of support for a 3rd term to the House of Representatives here in Vermont.
Thank you very much, Jay. We appreciate that. And thanks for sharing a bit about yourself. We're going to toss it now over to Peter Reed. Peter, go ahead.
Okay, good evening. My name is Peter Reed. I'm an independent, and I am your current state representative sharing the district with Jay Hooper. I was appointed by the governor in January of this year to fill Ben Jickling's seat when he moved to Wisconsin. And it was certainly a unique year to start in the legislature, first in person and then later via Zoom. Representing our district and working one-on-one to help many constituents during COVID-19 has been the most rewarding job in my 40-plus year career, and I would love to keep doing it. While I'm not a native Vermonter, my wife Karen and I set a goal when we were first married 41 years ago that we would ultimately settle in Vermont. We finally bought our Braintree home in 2007, and our dreams came true when we moved here permanently in 2014. We're still amazed every morning when we look out over the mountain view, especially this week. Karen and I have 4 adult children and 2 granddaughters who live far away, and we miss them terribly. I spent 35 years working as a business manager for several large financial firms, mainly focused on Latin American banking and securities. I was able to take early retirement and escape that stressful life, but had the hope that I could find some interesting work in Vermont, and I did. I spent 4 years with Northfield Savings Bank as the Randolph branch manager, which offered a crash course in our community, local businesses, civic organizations, and the diverse personalities of our neighbors. I also witnessed firsthand the financial challenges faced by many of our residents and the risks faced by businesses in our rural economy. I'm active as a board member in several local organizations, including Gifford Medical Center, RACDC, and Sunrise Rotary. I served as chair of the Randolph Economic Development Council and was a leader in our successful R3 initiative. I like working with people to solve problems and also try to be a good listener, a good neighbor, and a good representative for everyone in our district. I look forward to our conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. We're going to toss it over to Charlie Russell now. Take it away, Charlie.
Thank you very much. I'm Charles Russell. I'm running for one of the 2 House seats in the Orange-Washington district. I am a former dairy farmer, currently a co-owner of Russell Ag LLC with one of my sons, Caleb, and we are haymakers. I'm a graduate of Vermont Technical College and the University of Vermont, and I have a degree in resource economics. I served in the U.S. Navy from 1966 to 1969, including 11 months in Vietnam in country as a crew member on our Navy River Patrol boat, which are commonly known as a PBR. And I'm a recipient of the Purple Heart. I've served in the Randolph School Board, the Budget Committee, and as a Justice of the Peace several times. I've served on Orange County Farm Bureau, VTC Alumni Association, including 6 years as president, was a member of the Orange County and Green Mountain Dairy Promotion Committee. And I've also served as a board member on the Federal Land Bank and the Farm Credit Bank of the White River Junction, St. Johnsbury, and Newport offices. I'm currently in 5th year of hosting a radio program anchored in the Word, and it's a Bible-based radio program that's broadcast on WCVR in Randolph and WCFR in Springfield, Vermont. Married to Sandra Nolan, who's from Underhill, Vermont. We have 7 grown children and 13 grandchildren, and we still live at the farm that we've been on since for over 40 years. And I want to say that I'm very grateful to be a candidate for this House seat. And really why I'm running is quite simply, I want my freedom back. I want to live a life that isn't overburdened in taxes, regulations, and endless rules, which is what this legislature and the past several years have given us. If I'm elected, I'll be focused on freedom through a thriving economy, freedom in education through educational choice, freedom from government oversight through threatening regulations and oppressive taxation, and freedom from life-altering laws like Global Warming Solutions Act.
All right, that's time, Charlie.
Our current representatives. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Charlie. And last but not least, we're going to toss it over to Larry Satcowitz. How you doing, Larry?
Yeah, good, Dylan. Thank you. So my name is Larry Satcowitz. I'm a Democrat. In just a few weeks, it'll be 18 years since my wife and I bought our house in Randolph. We got our first child on the way. It seemed like the right time for us to settle down. I didn't know much about this area other than it was an okay commute from both our jobs. But over these many years, I've gotten to know this community well, and I am hugely grateful to be able to raise our children in this very beautiful and civilized place filled with so many wonderful people. A few years back, as our kids were getting older and needing less attention, I was looking for a way to give back to this place. And so I ran for an open seat on the select board here in Randolph. I'm now in my second term on the Randolph Select Board. During that time, I've helped provide leadership that's resulted in a revitalized recreation program, revamped police force, and the hiring of an economic development coordinator who's helped bring in many hundreds of thousands of dollars of grant money to the town. I currently work closely with the recreation, water, wastewater, and budget committees, and I was chair of the ad hoc committee that studied policing in Randolph a couple of years ago. Been a consistent voice for local government that's transparent, accountable, and responsive. In general, I'm a pretty well-informed person. I've long paid close attention to local, state, and national affairs. I read widely in many other areas as well. A math teacher of many years, practiced at explaining myself to others while taking their feedback into account. And I'm comfortable with statistical and numerical analysis. I'm not a natural leader, but through my time teaching and on the select board, I've learned a lot about how to help groups work towards a common goal. I like to think of myself as practical, open-minded, and fair. Thank you to the Herald so much for providing this forum. This is a great local tradition.
All righty, thank you very much, Larry, and thank you to all the candidates. I understand that out there in the world of YouTube, we're having some audio issues, but we're working on addressing those. All I can say to the viewers right now is bear with us, and to Jay Hooper, try and speak up when you can, and we're going to keep on rolling. The first question for everybody. Looking at the current session so far, please name a piece of legislation that passed that you support, and name one that you wish hadn't passed. Is there a current piece of legislation that you strongly oppose or support? And for this one, because he went last in introductions, we're going to start off with Larry Sackler, or Larry, not Larry Sackler, Larry Satcowitz, excuse me. Go ahead, Larry Satcowitz. I'll go ahead and unmute yourself, Larry.
There we go. I can't think off the top of my head of one that I did not support. I thought the legislature did a pretty good job this past session of putting forth and passing important bills. Recent piece of legislation that passed that I supported was the budget. Probably, always one of the most important things that the legislature does. I thought they did a great deal of balancing between our needs for COVID and keeping expenditures in check and making sure that there was money to do everything we did. And I thought they did a really good job with that.
All righty. Is there anything you want to elaborate on? You have a little bit more time remaining for your response.
No, I think I covered it. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to toss this question now over to Kevin Doering. Kevin, how do you feel about this this session and the legislation that has passed? And is there anything that you wish hadn't passed?
Well, I want to thank the Herald again. I didn't say that opening up, and I tried to fire my input in the beginning to get under the 2 minutes. I want to just say thank you to all involved. And I want to say I'm trying to run for the average Vermonter, that the people I talk to that are just not making it or struggling. So that having said, in your question, I would have not overridden the governor's veto on the Global Warming Solutions Act. That may surprise some people who know me well. I'm a climate and atmospheric scientist by training, and I know quite a bit about global warming, and I think we should be doing our part about it. I think the governor was reasonable in what he wanted done, and I think that this legislature did a good job with putting the reductions in place. I would have supported the governor's veto because I think the bill that passed may be unconstitutional, is a delegation of excessive authority to the legislative branch and a citizens council or council appointees, and then it has lawsuit provisions. And if those provisions are followed, one person could file a lawsuit against the state, hold up the legislation for 2 years, and then state citizens would have to fund the AG's office to represent that, as well as fund the person who brought the lawsuit. And anyone could do that. So for those reasons, I would not have, I would have worked to improve that legislation better. And I could go on and on about this, about the percentage of Vermont emissions, et cetera. What can I say that was positive? I think the legislature worked well together on budgeting. I think the parties, there is a civility sometimes in Vermont that works well. The pandemic, I have to applaud the governor's office and Dr. Levine for how they've handled it and the use of those pandemic funds that are getting out to Vermonters for help. I think there
Okay,
was a
that's time, Kevin.
Yep,
That's time. Thanks for your response. We appreciate it. We're going to toss the same question to Peter Reed now. Peter Reed, as someone who is in the chamber, what's a piece of legislation that passed? Is there something that you wish hadn't passed? Give us your take on this question.
Well, in terms of the bills that passed, I think one that I picked this one because I worked on it the whole session was H607, which was a bill that was aimed at workforce development in the healthcare sector. If you go back a couple of years, actually when Ben was on the healthcare committee, the House passed a bill to create a study committee on rural healthcare. And one of the outcomes of the report that they came up with was the extreme shortage of healthcare workers we have in the state. So that bill created both a small task force to really focus on how we develop it, but the most important part was created some scholarships totaling about $1.8 million for nurses and doctors who are studying in Vermont and are willing to work in Vermont once they graduate, in sort of as a trade-off for the scholarships that they're given. So that passed on the very last day. It was kind of exciting. The bill that I think I opposed was the Act 250 reform, because it got stripped down and really ended up doing not a whole lot. The pieces that were in it were okay, but I think in the end we lost a big opportunity to reform Act 250, and I think the next legislative session will have to pick that up again and do a better job with it.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. We're going to go over to Jay Hooper. Jay, tell us about your thoughts on the bills moving through the chamber this year, and if there's anything that you opposed or supported.
Dylan, am I projecting and enunciating well enough now?
We're working on it. Keep on going.
Okay, you get louder? All right.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with Peter. I also voted no on the Act 250 bill. And, well, it was for a number of reasons, but fundamentally, I believe that Zoom is not a proper channel to pass an abundance of significant legislation like the Act 250 reform effort. Among other reasons, that bill did not meet the objectives that each of the different interest groups had for its outcome. So for us to have a no huddle offense and try and hustle through this nothing burger of legislative intent, I think was not something to do this year. It's something that it's a conversation we will inevitably return to next session. So why not just wait till then? I also did have a lot of constituents from very different political persuasions, all agreeing that a no vote was, and for different reasons, but to me it was obvious that I should vote no. A bill that I supported was the Global Warming Solutions Act, because as a representative of young people, young Vermonters, I believe that we have to hustle on the urgency with climate action.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. And last but not least for this question, Charlie Russell, tell us about your opinion of the bills that have been going through the chamber and if there are any that you support or oppose.
Well, first of all, I was not a bill, but I would say that the legislature works very well together, mainly because it's pretty much an inbred system of legislators there. All the same, they march pretty much to a lockstep with one another, and I congratulate them for that. I opposed, in fact, strongly this Global Solutions Act, Global Warming Solutions Act. This bill puts decision-making into the hands of bureaucrats. The legislature has shoved it out of their way. Get it away from me. Let these guys take care of it. They have no responsibility. And we can pass it on and not worry about it and say that we have done a wonderful thing for the people of Vermont when in fact they haven't. That's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you very much. And we're going to switch gears a little bit. So the first question is a question that we also asked during our first debate, and we're going to ask each of you as well. And that question is, do you agree with the governor's decision to allow schools to open in person? Why or why not? And to start this one off, we're going to start out with, let's start out with Charlie this time. Here's your, you get the first bite of the apple for this one, Charlie.
Sure. Actually, I think that the whole coronavirus, the rules and things that were put in place were extreme. I think that in the end, and I think history is going to have to show this at some date in the future, obviously, that the economy was hurt. The ramifications of a weak economy and a weakened economy is far worse than what we ever saw. And I realized that some measure had to be taken, and I agree with some of it, but I do agree that the governor needed to open things up again. We already know that children are least affected by this pandemic, so to speak. And so I agree with the governor on that.
Okay, all righty. Is there any point you want to elaborate on? You have a little more time left in your response time.
Well, only that I think that government oversight on this thing, I'm pretty much a free will kind of a person. I believe that if people want to wear masks and protect themselves from any disease, for all that goes, when I was in the 60s, I was in Japan, almost everybody wore a mask for whatever reason, probably smog. But I think people need to make their own decision on this. If your math works, it'll save you.
All righty. We're going to toss this question over now to Jay Hooper. Jay, how do you feel about the governor's decision to allow schools to reopen in person?
Well, being that I serve on the House Education Committee, this was a discussion that we had. We let him take the lead on as a committee and a legislature. And I agree with Phil Scott's reasoning around sending students back. The major reason is because parents needed that to happen, particularly working parents. Not every household is privileged to have the internet connection that we're all enjoying right now, and the infrastructure isn't really there for not everybody has the options that other households do. So it was actually really important for some households that that decision was made by the governor, and I agree with it.
Okay, thank you, Jay. We're going to go up to Peter Reed. How do you feel about the governor's decision to reopen the schools?
Well, I think it was the right decision, especially given that the situation we have in Vermont. We're very fortunate to have a very low incidence of COVID-19. That may not continue forever, but I think we've been the state government, I think, especially from the administration, has handled this whole COVID thing pretty well. The school decision, I think, is important. It got a little dicey in the beginning, and there was still a lot of doubt. But I think as we look at it now that it's started, it seems to be working. I know there are teachers and administrators that were very concerned about it, and I think that's totally legitimate. And I'm not sure that everybody necessarily got a full voice in the process, but at the same time, as Jay mentioned, getting people back to work, getting people's lives under some degree of semblance, it was important to get kids back to school. I think it's important for the kids, and but at the same time, we have to monitor very carefully, and I think we are. I think we have testing capability, certainly in our area here, that is very good. So all in all, I think it's gone pretty well, and I did support it.
All right, thank you very much, Peter Reed. Up there on to Randolph Center and Kevin Doering. Kevin, how do you feel about the governor's decision to reopen the schools?
I get fired up about education, so when I get to my minute and a half, cut me off, Dylan. I need to let you know I'm a Vermont licensed elementary and middle school teacher, math and science. I've also taught in high school, and I've taught in 2 colleges in Vermont. We need to do a lot of work with education. I hope there's another question about education, because when I got to teaching in college, I was appalled by what students were bringing into the classroom as what they thought things were. So, and we need to do more. So let me ask quickly. I think that I already said earlier in my opener, the governor's done a great job with Dr. Levine. I think what you're asking is way more complicated than what you've heard from others speaking so far. There's actually 3 phases to opening. We've just started phase 3. This was a hybrid decision. And I have to let you know also that I have an education background with the Agency of Education. So things that I state are not the opinion of the administration of education. This is me as a candidate. But we're in phase 3 now, and some SUs and SDs are still doing hybrid learning. Some parents are allowed to keep their children home. If they have a grandparent there, for example, they don't have to send them into school. So Vermont has done what it does well, which is the state gives advice, information from the health department and the Agency of Education, and Vermonters and local SU and SD supervisory unions and supervisory districts make the call. Not everyone is fully open now. Elementary kids have to be there as much as possible, and I think we have to support parents with kids as well. But the elementary kids need in-person instruction and the socialization. As you get older, high school, you can do some Zooming and hybrid. So I think what Vermont has rolled out has been good, and I think what Vermont has done with this pandemic has been excellent.
All righty, that's time. Well timed, Kevin. We're going to go up to Larry Satcowitz. Larry, what do you think about the governor's decision regarding reopening for in-person education?
Yeah, I think, having the governor start out by, having all his policy around the pandemic based firmly in science was hugely important, something we saw didn't happen in other states. And that's, a big reason why we're doing so well. And I think it allowed us to consider opening schools. And for many, many parents, it was absolutely essential for them to be able to send their kids to school in some form. And I know in certain places in the state, it's different than it is around here. But I know the kids really need that in-person instruction, and the more we can do that, the better. We need to keep close eye on how it goes, and if things start to deteriorate, we'll of course need to take other action. But hopefully we'll be able to get through this okay. Anytime we have policy, there's risks and there's benefits and costs, and for me, this seems like we're pretty clearly on the side of this being a good decision, that the potential benefits outweigh the potential costs, and hopefully it will continue to do so.
All righty, thank you very much, Larry Satcowitz. On to the next question, the next essay question, as it were. This month, the legislature passed S54, a bill that would establish a tax and regulate market for cannabis. The bill has received pushback from coalitions of farmers and social justice activists because they're concerned it doesn't adequately support farmers or address a disproportionate Black, Indigenous, and people of color who have been imprisoned for illegal cannabis use and possession. Do you support this bill? If not, would you consider any bill that supports the legalization of cannabis? We're going to start this one off with Jay Hooper. Take it away, Jay.
Yes, I do support it. I did support it. I voted for the bill. I've always believed that if you're going to legalize marijuana, you might as well tax it to create a new source of revenue for a modest state budget like that of the state of Vermont. I believe that right now we really need the funds, so it's timely. I guess this special session was a blessing in that regard on this issue, but I will say that stores are not allowed to open until October of 2022, and to me that's a great that's a far out enough timeline that we're going to have plenty of opportunity to go back to the drawing board next session and the following session to work out the kinks, address some of those issues that you've just mentioned. In terms of the criticism about corporations coming in, there are a lot of small farmers, hemp farmers, who are worried that this bill will facilitate a whole new category of big tobacco, for example. And I don't think that that's true. I think this bill does have a distinct focus on preventing monopoly. For instance, you're only allowed to have one store. If you open up a dispensary, you may not have a second. So you can't have a chain. There are going to be requirements about the size of your operation. When it comes to addressing the highway safety issues, we do have a saliva test option, but you'll need to get a warrant for it. So the bill, aside from economic development,
10 seconds, Jay.
In some respects, it was also a criminal justice reform bill, as it included expungements for over 10,000 Vermonters convicted of marijuana-related crimes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. We're going to toss this one over to Larry Satcowitz now. Larry, how do you feel about S54 and the tax and regulate market for cannabis and its equity amongst traditionally marginalized people. Oh, you're muted, Larry.
Okay, sorry about that. So for this bill, I guess I'd largely agree with Jay, about we have time still to modify the bill, to modify it to help with some of those concerns. One thing I would like to point out, though, is that we've been treating marijuana as a criminal problem when it really ought to be a public health issue. And so funds raised from this, I would like to see them go towards ameliorating problems that might come up because of legalization. I think that we need to treat this as a public health issue, not a criminal issue. And boy, I'm not being muted really off my game here. I think I made my point. Thanks, Dylan.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to toss this one now over to Charlie Russell. Charlie, tell us how you feel about the tax and regulate market for cannabis.
Yeah, well, I'll just back up a little further and say, I don't want cannabis available to anybody in the state. I'm a parent and a grandparent, and I don't like my kids being exposed in a state to people smoking pot. It's a drug and it leads to other drugs. That is a fact. You go to these rehab centers and ask these guys that have been on, and women that have been on drugs half their lives, they're going to tell you they got started with marijuana. And for me, marijuana should be taboo. Look, it's time for our legislature to be involved in creating a thriving economy for Vermonters so they can get a good job and so that they can live a good life in this state and be able to pay these taxes that everybody wants so much of. It's time to get away from this marijuana, make it illegal and be done.
All righty, well, that's clear enough. Let's toss this one up to Randolph Senator Kevin Doering. How do you feel about S54, Kevin?
Well, this is why I'm running as a moderate between the extremes. There are medicinal health purposes for marijuana that have been shown, and there's some things that I disagree with what Charlie said in a couple of points. But my problem with the bill is it's already legal in Vermont. We're beyond that. The problem now is how we do it and regulate it financially. And as I read this bill, I worry about what's going on in California and Oregon and some other states out west, which have put regulatory regimes in place. Watch drug use increase and watch the black markets take over anyway. So I don't think it has worked. And I would share one thing a little bit differently than some people have spoken about is I don't believe we should use things like this for raising revenue. States that put gambling in place and put casinos in, that resulted in massive gambling increases in their state and addicted people. Yeah, they got some more revenue, but I don't think Vermont needs that. I think the revenue is trivial in the $7.2 billion budget. And I would not support moving ahead. I also think it sends the wrong signal to young people. If we keep pushing to be more progressive in this area about cannabis and other things, it's not sending the right message. I do believe in the highway safety things, and I would support the governor's pressure to, and I think one other candidate already mentioned this, about making sure money goes into education and reduction in need for use of drugs. But I also think, and the other part of the question you asked is we need to do a lot more listening to people of color in the state. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to do and listen as well. So hope that answers the question. But economically, I don't see it of any value at all, and I would support the bill as drafted.
All righty, there we go. And off to Peter Reed. How do you feel about S54 and the tax and regulate market for cannabis?
Well, I supported this bill both times we voted on it in the House, and I think it's the right direction for us to be taking, especially given that we legalized cannabis a couple of years ago. I think the fact that we raise revenue is a nice plus. I don't think it's the driving force behind this, but I think it's important that we're taking 30% of the revenue and applying it towards drug treatment and addiction prevention and things of that nature. So we will benefit people who are afflicted by drug abuse. At the same time, a lot of revenue will be raised in terms of taxes for education. So that's another piece, that the sales tax revenue will all go to our educational system, which obviously needs as much support as we can give it. I think a couple things that went along with this, I think the expungement kind of sister bill that went with this was very important, and will really kind of clear the records of a lot of people. I think there was a sincere effort to try to address the racial inequities and deal with the small farmers. I don't think it went far enough, but there was a step in that direction. And I think the other important thing is there is a local say in communities. They can opt in for having cannabis dispensaries in their community or opt out. So they have the ability at a community level to decide. I do wish we were able to get more of the revenue targeted directly to communities that hosted cannabis operations, but in the end, that didn't happen with the bill. So net, I think it's a good step forward, and I hope the governor signs it.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter Reed. The next question is for the independent candidates, which are Kevin and Peter. How does your platform differ from that of the Democratic candidates? And for the Democratic and Republican candidates, what are your priorities of your political party, and what's most important to you? So, as the reigning independent, as it were, we're going to keep it right here with Peter Reed. How is your platform different from that of the Democrats?
Well, I think in terms of platform, I do agree with a fair number of the issues that are also favored by the Democrats. I don't think I go as far on many of the issues as they do. I think the more important issue is how we operate in the legislature. And I've seen firsthand the pressure that can be applied to people from the party side to toe the line, both Republican and Democrat, and the repercussions if one doesn't follow along with that. And it's unfortunate that some issues have to get so partisan, but it does happen. And as an independent, we have the ability to listen to all sides. I go to all the different caucuses. I get some strange looks sometimes when I show up at them, but I think the main objective for me is to gather as much information as I can and look at each issue independently and make up my own mind and look at what my constituents want. Not that I'm necessarily delivering all the time exactly what the majority might want. There are probably times when that doesn't happen, but I do like to make up my own mind, and I do resent being pressured by outside groups to make their point and try to get me to sway one way or another, and I've had it happen.
All righty, so up to Kevin Doering and Randolph Center. How is your platform different from that of the Democrats? Tell me your stance on being an independent.
I do need to open with to say that I also applied for the same job that Mr. Reed was appointed for. And one of the reasons I decided to run right now as an independent was I looked at his voting record, and it was pretty much straight line Democratic progressive. So I'm not saying he's a fine man. I'm saying he's thinking well and bringing good skills to the House. But what motivated me was we need moderate thinkers. We don't need left wing. We don't need right wing. We need more people in the center. From my review of the House legislature, there's about 10 independent thinkers. I think there are 6 or 7 independents by party, and almost all the time they vote towards Democratic things. I'm running because of fiscal. Clearly, I've done budgeting in the federal government in New York City, budgeting with the state of Maine and the state of Vermont, and budgeting as the chair of the select board. The economy is everything. We're spending way more than we can realistically appropriate. I don't agree we should spend more money on education. I think we need to redistribute it. It's not being spent wisely. My priorities are those ABCs I said when I opened up affordability. I want to run for young people. I'm watching my own kids grow up and leave. I'm watching a lot of people's young people go up and leave. Ben Jickling's another example. We were losing good people, and we're losing far too many young Vermonters because they can't find economic opportunity here. And I stand up for those. I mentored students downtown for 7 years, right in Randolph, and I learned a lot from my students, both in Randolph, East Randolph, and other schools I've taught at. And what I'm hearing from those students, and they are progressive in their thinking, is, can you help me, Kevin, with rent? Can you help me find a better job? I can't afford to stay here. So I'll stop there because I'm probably out of time, Dylan. But I could go on a lot about that. It's for young Vermonters. They're vulnerable, keeping property taxes down, and solutions that make sense for the average Vermonter. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you very much, Kevin. Now we're going to go on to Larry Satcowitz. Tell us, Larry, As a Democrat, what priorities of your political party are most important to you? This is kind of the tail end of that same question. You're muted.
Yeah, it's got to be about making Vermont work for working class and middle class folks. It has been really hard for many, many people for a really long time now. I think that, that the real thrust of most of the policies that the Democrats have put forward in the legislature for years now have been about trying to make life better for those folks, which is most of us. Increasing the minimum wage, passing paid family and medical leave, helping out with trying to get medical insurance reform, which was not successful for lots of reasons, largely due to outside, the state. But I think that's really been the biggest thrust of policy that we've seen in recent years. And, the system that we live in does make it really hard for folks at that end of the spectrum. Super wealthy people are doing great. And we need to make policies so that ordinary people are able to do better.
All righty, thank you very much, Larry. And we're going to swing this one down to Charlie Russell. Charlie, as a Republican, what are the priorities of your political party that are most important to you? Oh, you're muted, Charlie. Sorry. Unmute your mic. There we go.
You can do it again. Yeah, I've run as a Republican and as an independent in the past. And I align with the Republican Party. It's I could have written their whole thing about what they believe, their platform. I believe that it is utmost importance for the legislature to do all in its power to create a thriving economy for Vermonters, for good paying jobs, for life-sustaining jobs. A thriving economy would stimulate the retail sector, and it would increase competition as families would have a larger portion of their income that would be available for flexible spending, instead of just keeping their head above water. Our current legislature and those two who serve us currently in the House do little else than add restrictions, laws, mandates, regulations, roadblocks of all kinds that effectively suffocate our economy and economic growth. And furthermore, they have focused their attention on fringe issues that have consumed their time, like this Global Warming Solutions Act. It's going to be a bane to low-income people because they're going to pay those taxes that are going to be mandated by the bureaucrats that they put this law in their lap.
All righty, Charlie Russell, thank you very much. And we're going to swing this one around to Jay Hooper. As the last word on this question, Jay Hooper, how do you feel about your party's platform, and what aspects of that platform are most important to you?
Dylan, I am a Democrat because I believe in the platform more than I would another. But my values and principles are based loosely off of the rigid platform of the Democratic Party. And you'll find, if you pore over my voting record, there are a number of instances where I've broken ranks to represent the values I believe are more closely aligned with my 5 towns and the constituents that live in those towns. I have to say, I'm not sure how many towns so far have received a direct mail piece that I've recently sent out, but I put a short quote on one side of it to really capture the essence of my political existence, or at least the existence I hope to have politically. And that is that my job is to truly understand the depths of your opinions, not to change your minds. Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much, Jay Hooper. And that concludes round 1 of the Herald debate. We're going to switch on over to the lightning round here, and the lightning round's a little different. These are going to be fairly quick questions, and we're going to be asking for responses from candidates that are about 10 seconds or less. Some of these are actually even yes or no questions. And we're going to try and go in the same order all the way down just to make this efficient. And we're going to start off with Larry Satcowitz. And the first question of the lightning round, starting with Larry, is, have you been doing in-person campaigning events during COVID-19? Oh, sorry, Larry. I think we might have been muted again.
Sounds like a yes no question. The answer is no. No in-person.
Okay. And now over to Kevin Doering. Have you been doing in-person campaigning events during COVID-19?
I've put out a flyer. I've worked on a little. I've called a lot of students and people that I care about. I've done some talking to farmers and some local businessmen. But it's not the campaign I wanted to run. I'm a door-to-door guy. When I ran in Maine, I visited everyone's yard, and you know, I would compliment Jay and Ben of having done that too. Can't do it this time. Trying my best though. Thank you.
All righty, on to Peter Reed. Have you been doing any in-person campaign events during COVID-19?
No, I have not, and I've dropped off a few lawn signs with friends and neighbors, but pretty much had to abandon that whole plan of going out and visiting people.
All righty, and we're gonna move on to Jay Hooper now. Jay Hooper, what about you? Have you been doing any in-person campaigning?
Well, I keep telling folks the consensus is largely between legislators and candidates that indeed we're expected to not do the same old door-to-door approach that we usually do. But I'm really saddened by that because, firstly, it's my favorite part of the job. I really enjoy visiting with folks on their porch, in their element, learning more about them. But I will say that if I see you in your garden, I'll probably pull into your driveway and ask you for your vote.
All righty. And moving on to Charlie for this last one. Have you been doing any in-person campaigning during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I've been doing some, but probably I would term it as a minimal. Gotten out, put some lawn signs out and talked to people about a few other things I've made quite an effort to put out some pieces that would say what I believe in, so people would at least know where I come from.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlie. We're going to go right back up to Larry Satcowitz here. Larry, the State Board of Education recently allowed 2 districts in southern Vermont to separate after they merged under Act 46. What is your position regarding districts that may seek similar actions? And just a reminder to unmute yourself.
I did this time.
All right.
But thanks for the reminder. Well, it certainly is a legal option right now. I honestly don't know enough about the particular cases under which that is legal and how that affects these districts. It does seem like it is violating the spirit of Act 46 if it's not, even though it is legal under a separate statute. I remain kind of unconvinced that Act 46, accomplished what it was set out to accomplish, but we won't know for quite a while still.
Okay, moving on to Kevin Doering. How do you feel about your position regarding districts that may seek similar actions in terms of unmerging through the mechanisms of Act 46?
Well, the state has a critical economic problem with education at $1.8 billion. We're spending more than we did 10 years ago for 20,000 less public school students. So we've got to do something. Act 46 was a stab at the legislature by it. It's also a state where we have local control. SUSDs can make decisions. Some of those have been forced by law. The one I know in the South, yeah, they're trying to get it back the way they had it before. It's convoluted, it's complex. That's why we need careful thinking on these issues and working with the administration and those particular SUSDs. What do those local people want? Education in Vermont is a very complicated tale because of the way it's run compared to other states.
All right, we'll have to save the rest of that for something other than the lightning round. Moving on to Peter Reed. How do you feel about these unmerging districts after Act 46, and what's your position on them?
Well, one of my goals is to understand our educational finance. I've been trying, but it is complex, as Kevin said. I think it's a slippery slope. I think I'd rather have us be going in the other direction and enforce consolidation.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, we're juggling a couple of things here. Jay Hooper, next question, or same question rather. How do you feel about districts unmerging in the wake of Act 46?
Dylan, this is a lightning round, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess I should keep it short then. If I was in the legislature when this bill was voted on, I would have voted no.
Okay, well that's pretty clear and straightforward. And Charlie Russell,
I mean,
sir,
I could give you a whole bunch. Okay.
You've been
Charlie
muted.
Russell.
Look, I believe that education decisions should be as close to the home as they can be, and that's why I support educational choice, which is also called a voucher system. I'm in favor of anything that decentralizes education. It is poison to our education system. We've gone downhill ever since we got away from these one-room schoolhouses. They worked. I'm not saying that's where we should go, but they worked.
Interesting position there. All right, next lightning round question. We will be pivoting to national politics. How do you think President Trump has handled the COVID-19 pandemic? And first up on this one is Larry Satcowitz. We're still in the lightning round, so we're maintaining this order for the sake of efficiency. Larry, how do you feel about President Trump and COVID-19?
It's been a disaster. It's been really clear. It's just been an absolute disaster. Hundreds of thousands of people dead. We could have prevented a lot of that with good leadership from the White House.
Okay, thank you very much, Larry. Over to Kevin Doering.
I would opine like that, probably somewhat agreement with Larry. Leadership is everything. We have redefined leadership in this country. Just press conferences that say one thing in one press conference, 3 weeks later say something totally different, has led the public to be confused. We haven't had leadership because we've had 50 states doing different things, dealing with the pandemic, and you can see it in the numbers. So Vermont's done a good job because we followed the governor and Dr. Levine, and the country's struggling because it's followed in a disparate leadership that's been confused. Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much. On to Peter Reed. How do you feel about how the president has handled the COVID-19 pandemic?
Complete disaster. I think that says it all.
All righty, thank you very much. We barely get a chance to see you, but we're going to move on to Jay Hooper. Same question. How do you feel President Trump has handled the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think it's been less than consistent. It's been inflammatory, his remarks, and largely divisive. So I think 200,000 deaths is a far larger toll than we needed to face.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. And we're gonna swing this last one over to Charlie. This is the second to last question on the lightning round. How do you feel the president has handled the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, the president is not the one that really directs what happens. We've seen that by the variety of things that happen in different states. I think with where he stands, he did as good a job as he could. And with the kind of advice he's gotten from all different kinds of advice from all different kinds of people, it put him in a bad position. And by the way, you can see the lockstep that I'm talking about.
All right, thank you very much, Charlie. And we're gonna do one more lightning round. This affects everybody. This is something that we've encountered a couple of times here at the Herald. So do you feel that you have the technological abilities to participate in a virtual legislative session if the legislature continues with remote sessions next year? We're gonna start off with Larry Satcowitz. As I get the camera to swing around on Larry, here we go.
Yeah, sure. Since the start of the pandemic, when we've gone into lockdown, the select board that I'm a part of is meeting via Zoom, and I think we've done a pretty good job of it. It's not optimal, but it's workable, and it's really not that complicated either.
Okay, thank you very much, Larry. Kevin, do you feel like you have the technological capabilities and skill to participate virtually in the next legislative session?
Absolutely, doing meetings from home for 6 months now, and I think the technology has improved. I also would share that we had 5 people doing conferences. I took on a lot of young people during the pandemic here working, so our Wi-Fi capability got maxed. I'd love to talk about Wi-Fi as well from an educational standpoint. Yes.
All righty.
Yeah.
On to Peter Reed. How do you feel about your technology skills and the ability to participate virtually in a legislative session?
Well, I think I've become somewhat of a Zoom expert in the last few months, and I have the advantage of having EC fiber at my house, so that's a great plus. I think the problem is a lot of our fellow legislators don't have that, and we have had problems with people just not being able to attend on the screen because they don't have enough bandwidth. So that's a key thing we need to work on.
Okay, same question over to Jay Hooper. How do you feel about your technological prowess and participating in a virtual session?
Well, being that I am the only millennial in this gamut, I think I can say assertively and confidently that indeed I have the technological capacity to do this. So, and of course, Peter and I have been doing it for months. So.
All righty, and last but not least, Charlie Russell, for the last part of our lightning round. Do you feel that you have the technological acumen to participate in a virtual legislative session?
Well, and I'm not going to hold it against Jay that he's a millennial. I mean, I'm glad you did it. I cut my teeth on a Radio Shack TRS-80, which was what, 32 megabytes or something, kilobytes. And I've learned on, as softwares come out, I've learned Lotus 123 and Microsoft Publisher and up to Word and Excel and so on. I'm an old techie. Yeah, I can do it.
All righty, thank you very much, Charlie Russell. And if you're just joining us, we are broadcasting live from the White River Valley Herald and here in beautiful downtown Randolph, Vermont. As we go along here, we are talking with candidates from the Orange-Washington-Addison district for the House. My name is Dylan Kelley, and I am joined by candidates Kevin Doering, Jay Hooper, Peter Reed. Joe Roche will not be joining us this evening, but Charlie Russell is here along with Larry Satcowitz. We are going into our final round, and the first question we will launch, let's launch this one at Kevin first. What so far do you feel has been your most important project to better your community? Off to Kevin Doering.
I'd have to say the 17 and a half years I've spent writing about weather up here, the local history I've done, participation in local history and projects in the center, the book that I did with Mim Herwig. We're talking local community. I read the Carol Sing for 7 years right there at the a couple places at VTC, and then the Red Schoolhouse, as we call it. What do we have for time in this, Dylan? Am I firing this off? Is this a fast one or a little more time?
Oh, no, this is like an essay question.
This is an essay question about community support?
Generally, yes.
Yeah, I would say the best thing I've done is teach, get into teaching, change my career from environmental and budget and policy into becoming education, learning from young people, running classes and telling the kids, I'm going to learn as much from you as you are from me. And the kids are like, oh no, Mr. Doering, we want to hear you, whatever. No. This is how I run class, particularly middle, high school, and college. I think the thing that I enjoyed the most and learned the most from was mentoring downtown at the Bethany UCC for 7 years when Robin Yunker-Boyce was there and others. I loved the kids. It was exhausting to come home from teaching at 5 o'clock and then fire down there for another 5 or 6 hours. But I did that for Friday nights for 7 or 8 years. I'd never take that back. So no, I wasn't running and been in an official office locally. I've been in state government in a number of fronts, and then teaching in classrooms in both independent and public school systems. So the way I believe in communities are young and are vulnerable, the young Vermonters who want to stay and share their dreams. And I like to just be as supportive of them as I can. Thank you for the question.
All right, thank you very much, Kevin. Charlie Russell, same question. What do you feel has been your most important contribution to your community?
Well, for the last 5 years, I've produced a radio program called Anchored in the Word. It's it's a gospel of Jesus Christ. It's a Bible fundamentalist Bible teaching. Anyone can hear it at 8 o'clock every Sunday morning on WCVR. I think it's the most important thing I have done in recent years. I've served on a lot of, like school board and budget committee and so on. But I think that is probably the most important thing I've done, and I continue to do it.
All righty, thank you very much, Charlie. We're going to go up to Larry Satcowitz here in Randolph. Larry, what do you think has been your most important contribution to the community?
It's definitely been the last 3.5 years that I've been on the select board. It's been incredibly gratifying, interesting. I've learned a tremendous amount about how municipal government works, how it affects all of our lives. On the select board, we're responsible for overseeing and hiring the town manager, responsible for overseeing and setting the fiscal priorities of the entire town, making sure that all the committees that are at work, are all able to do what they do and do so effectively. And, municipal government, it seems like, well, it's just a little town. What could there be so much to happen? But it's hugely complicated. And it's been really gratifying to help the town get through that process of, good government.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to go to Peter Reed. Peter, what do you feel has been the most important project that you undertaken to better your community?
Well, I would say the one thing that stands out to me is the R3 process that we went through a couple of years ago in town that was sponsored by the Vermont Council on Rural Development. And it was an effort to try to pull people together in the town to look at our future and try to work together. There had been a lot of strife in town and a lot of groups that weren't working very well together. And I think we were effective at pulling together a lot of citizens, a couple different task forces that really made a difference in moving some things forward and making people work together. And one of the top priorities we had was an economic development director, which Larry mentioned earlier, and that ended up happening. So that was a big step forward for Randolph, at least. And but I think the surrounding area benefited a lot from the R3 process, and it was a great effort. And I got to meet a lot of very interesting people that way. The other one I would highlight is something that hasn't happened yet, but I've been working for a couple of years as a member of RECDC to try to get some affordable housing built in downtown Randolph. And we seem to be inching closer to that. I've worked with Larry on that project, and I think there's some real hope to get some affordable housing for people, which is really needed in order to attract the workforce that we need.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. And on to Jay Hooper. Last bite at this particular apple. What do you feel has been your most important project to better your community? Jay Hooper.
Dylan, this is really our last round.
No, this is the
right?
last. Yeah, this is our last round, but this is not the last question by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, well, because I was thinking this thing's got to go on for another hour, right? I mean, I was hoping to make it over to the firehouse because tonight and every other Monday of the month, there's a business meeting or a training for volunteer firefighters. And so I was hoping I could catch the tail end of the training, but I guess probably won't happen. Among the things that I've done as a community member since I've been back from college have been similar to what Peter's just described regarding the Randolph region re-energized economic development effort to basically try and consolidate efforts amongst rivaling groups that had former turf disputes, perhaps. Basically the effort has been to get everybody to pull the same cart in the same direction. And from a personal standpoint, I can say that my two brothers and I have constructed a small building that we've installed between the McDonald's and the mobile station off of exit 4, so that when people pull off of the interstate traveling from Boston to Quebec, for instance, they can know what Randolph has downtown to offer. I was pleased to team up with the Chamber of Commerce to replace the little marketing display that they have had there for years. But of all 40 brochures that were there, most of them had given tourists permission to hop right back on the interstate and maybe go seek a tour of Rock of Ages, or go visit Shelburne Farms, or maybe a tour of the Ben and Jerry's factory up north. But what we want is for people to go down the hill. When they charge their electric cars for 2 hours, they'll visit the bookstore, buy a sandwich. We want to create an ecosystem for local businesses to thrive together and make Randolph an attraction.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. And we're going to stick right here with Jay Hooper for the next question, the next essay question, as it were. This month, the legislature overrode the governor's veto on the Global Warming Solutions Act, which, among other things, requires a 26% reduction in carbon emissions below 2005 levels by 2025. Do you think this is realistic? And if so, how would you propose to achieve that? If you do not think the legislature should move to repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act, if not, do you think the legislature should move to repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act? Do you think this is feasible? Back to Jay Hooper.
I think it is feasible, and I think that the House Education and Technology, the House Technology and what is the committee called? The committee that crafted the bill did all the work that they needed to do to determine that rigid timeline is indeed achievable if we focus, if we make sure to get down to business and do the work. But the bill specifically, which I supported overriding the governor's veto because we need to move on this, even though this bill is really not that strong. It's basically a plan to make a plan. We've created a council of 23 experts to figure out, and 8 of which are chosen by the governor, to decide, to determine what Vermont has for options in terms of addressing climate change. So in my response to the Herald this week, as to your questionnaire that you sent out to each of the candidates, I said, I'm not going to suggest a certain policy avenue to address climate change. I mean, after all, the whole reason why we created this council was to do that for us. People have been complaining that 23 people in a room deciding on a course of action for addressing climate change is way too many people. That's going to be a zoo, I've heard. Well, I'll tell you what, 23 experts with a distinct task, a distinct responsibility of figuring out what we have for options as a state, as a legislature, is going to be a lot better than the 180 that have continued to fail year after year in addressing this issue. And when it comes to the climate goals that Patsy French and her legislative colleagues passed in recent
10
years,
seconds.
we're actually going in the opposite direction. So the urgency is there. We needed to move on it. And I respect the governor, but we had to override.
Okay, moving on to Charlie Russell. In regard to the Global Warming Solutions Act, do you believe that a 26% reduction in carbon emissions by 2025 is realistic? And if not, what do you think the legislature should do?
Well, I grew up in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. And when I was a kid, the Cuyahoga River caught on fire almost every summer because it was somebody's typing, because it was so thoroughly polluted. Lake Erie was a cesspool. Today, it is a fishing paradise, not because of any oversight. Well, it took government somewhat to do it, but look, I have a hard time believing. I believe in global warming, but I don't believe it's man-made. And I think that if we do our best, which we have been doing, it'll cure itself. And I want this Global Warming Solutions Act. It should have been vetoed and left alone. I disagree with the legislature overriding it, but they march to the tune of the same drummer. They do what they're told.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlie Russell. We're gonna jump on up to Kevin Doering here. Kevin, how do you feel about the Global Warming Solutions Act, and do you feel that 26% reduction by 2025 is feasible or realistic?
So Dylan, you'll have to cut me off because I could talk about this for hours. I've been involved in climate change and global climate change for over 3 decades, wrote papers on it, have collected data across New England. I'm glad to hear that we've pretty much moved beyond whether it's happening or not. There's still a lot of people who say it isn't, and that's pretty absurd when we have, if you look at the US right now, we have wildfires in the west, flooding in the southeast, and drought in the northeast all at the same time. Individual events, yes. We also have 2,000 or 3,000 global positions measuring temperature on a regular basis, surface, seawater, and air. So this is a done deal. What can Vermont do? It's important to note that Vermont has 0.3% of the entire U.S. CO2 budget. So whether we can meet 26% or not, I've given you my view about the Citizens Council. I know that Jay pointed out that the governor gets to 0.8, but 12 is a majority, and the governor can point 8 or 10. It still won't be a majority. It's a ceding of executive function. To quote some other experts, I don't know who they'll be. I can tell the legislature it's directed towards high-profile people, commissioners and secretaries, not necessarily atmospheric scientists, air pollution meteorologists, engineers, and people who know how to reduce carbon emissions. Let me say a couple more quick things if I have time. California, if we talk about fleet, 50% of our budget is from transportation in Vermont. The governor's moving progressively on electric and hybridization, electric stations. Good. California changes what they want to do with the fleet. Their governor just put out a 2035 executive plan to turn completely electric and hybrid that'll change the U.S. car market. We are not going to be, we should be a leader, and we can do things. We can develop downtown. We can telecommute. We can reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. There's tons of things the tiny and proud state of Vermont can do, and I'd love to participate in them. What we can't do is change the national fleet, change what US EPA does, change what car emissions, transportation, electric utility grids. I could go on and on. How much time do I have, Dylan?
About 10 seconds.
Oh, 10 seconds. So I think we can do a lot better. I think we can make it localized. I think we can listen to local people and not hamstrung businesses or potential lawsuits over this down the road. 26% we can do as Vermonters. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Kevin Doering. On to Peter Reed. Peter Reed, how do you feel about the Global Warming Solutions Act, and do you think a 26% reduction is feasible?
Well, the Global Warming Solutions Act, and sorry if I went in lockstep, but I did on this. I was this was actually the first bill I signed on to the first week I was in the legislature, and I'm proud of that. I think it's something that we have to start working on. There's been a lot of criticism about the lawsuit aspect. I think that's kind of a red herring. There's not the ability for people to collect damages and things like that. So it may happen, but we're going to see 6 or 7 years down the road how that works out. I think we can reach these emissions goals. I think there has to be a lot of work done still. I agree the transportation sector needs some additional work, and we need incentives, not carbon taxes and penalties. In terms of electric cars in our area, I think we've got a long way to go. One of the other R3 initiatives we had here in Randolph was trying to get a charging station put up at the park and ride at exit 4, and we were we didn't get awarded that grant. It went to a couple of locations in Burlington, which maybe is the right answer. Electric cars may work a little better in that area than they might here. But I think it is something we can do. We have to work towards it. I have 2 little granddaughters, and that really makes you think twice about what kind of world we're leaving behind here. And I think we need to do everything we can. And it is a plan. We're not ceding authority from the legislature to a group of appointed people. They cannot pass laws. They can make recommendations. And other than if we had Kevin in the legislature, we don't have any climate experts in our legislative body. And I think we need the experts to chime in on this.
All righty, thank you very much, Peter Reed. Over to Charlie Russell. Charlie, how do you feel about the Global Warming Solutions Act, and do you think a 26% reduction in carbon emissions by 2025 is realistic?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's realistic. Look, you've heard 4 people over and over again create government solutions, where they shouldn't be doing it. I'm a small government. I believe in small government. I believe in people making decisions. If people want electric cars in our economy, they should go buy one. But for the government, for big government to come along and force us to do it, personally, I see a pristine atmosphere surrounding me, even when I go to Burlington. And I see clean water. I know that there are issues, and there's going to be, that have to be dealt with. The federal government used to give farmers phosphate to put on their fields, and now there's phosphorus in the water that's built up ever since then. So that's a big government solution. I think government has a great place in our society, but it's not the answer to everything. And everything that we do costs more money. It comes from the citizens, and every dollar they take from us is a measurement of $1 worth of freedom. And I want my freedom back, period.
All righty. With that period, we'll swing on over to Larry Satcowitz here in Randolph. Larry, how do you feel about the Global Warming Solutions Act, and do you think 26% by 2025 is realistic? Larry Satcowitz.
It's ambitious, but I think it's realistic. We can do a lot if we really try. Transportation is going to be rough. A lot of people have long commutes, and electric cars aren't appropriate in a lot of places. But Vermont's got some of the oldest, draftiest, least well-insulated housing stock in the whole country. There's a huge amount of low-hanging fruit right there. The house I'm sitting in right now, when we bought this place, we burned 1,300, 1,400 gallons of oil a year. We're down to about 100 now. So there's enormous gains that can be made if we put our investments in the right place. And it doesn't have to be, even if all you care about is your own economic self-interest, this kind of thing makes sense. The return on investment on these kinds of projects is not bad. And in some cases, it's really, really good. It's a matter of educating people, helping them out. There are people who can't afford the upfront cost, but we can help them out with loans and subsidies. And the sooner we stop sending all this money out of state to out of state fuel companies, the better our entire economy is going to be. We want to keep all this money local. It's just a huge waste to be sending all this out of state. We can really do better.
All righty. Thank you very much, Larry Satcowitz. And our next question is an interesting one here.
Hey, Dylan, before
yes,
you
go ahead.
continue,
Yes.
I know this is a forum, but it is also a debate, right? I mean, is it possible that I might respond to my favorite critic?
We're trying to keep this dedicated to the issues rather than having a back and forth, but I appreciate that sentiment, Jay, but for the sake of time, we're not going to have any rebuttals and counter rebuttals, but we're going to swing it back over here. All 6 candidates in this district are white men, as the vast majority of Vermont politicians are. Many women legislators with marginalized identities have reported experiencing harassment or worse while doing their jobs. This year is likely to see Vermont's first openly transgender woman elected as state representative and the first Black woman elected as state senator. If you are elected or re-elected, if anything, what would you personally do to make sure that the climate in the State House is such that your colleagues with marginalized identities are respected, listened to, and safe at work? We're going to start this one off with Larry Satcowitz.
Okay, I remembered the mute this time. So, I've been asked recently about what can we do to make marginalized people and people of color in our communities feel more comfortable. What can we do to support them? We live in a very, very white area. It must be really hard to be somebody who looks different around here. And I think, the very first step is having leaders in our community that stand up to racism, that stand up to people who are not okay with diversity. And I'm proud to be somebody who is on the record saying that, Black lives matter and that everybody matters and that we need to embrace diversity and make people comfortable in our communities.
All righty. Thank you very much, Larry. We're going to swing now over to Charlie Russell. Charlie, how do you feel about making the legislature safe and respected? People in the legislature feel safe, respected, and listened to in terms of transgender people, the first Black woman elected as senator, state senator, rather. How would you make sure that those people with marginalized identities are respected, listened to, and safe at work?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to look at someone and say and speak to them as though they are someone that's transgendered, Black, Latino, white, man or woman. I believe that, just my Christian belief is that all men have come from one blood. A Black man is not racially different than a white man. It's just they have more melanin in their skin. And I think most Black people have had it up to here with this racism talk. Until George Floyd's death, race relations and racism was less than 1% of the concerns of people in America. And over 10% are Black. So they alone could have made it, at least 10, but it wasn't. But I'll treat everyone equally, and I expect them to treat me that way and not call me a racist because I'm a white Anglo-Saxon male.
All righty. Thank you very much, Charlie Russell. We're going to swing this one over to Jay Hooper now. Jay Hooper.
Dylan, this is a tricky question. The reason is because we've actually already been discussing as a Democratic caucus. I can't speak for the Republicans or the independents, but this is a question we're struggling to address, actually, because on a number of occasions this session, and Peter can attest, there were moments of racially insensitive commentary on the House. And there were also moments where you could say some misogyny took form. And I guess I'm not certain I know the answer to your question. I just know that we are trying to figure out how we go about keeping other representatives accountable when they say things that can be really mistaken and really offensive. So in terms of creating a fair and safe working environment for those two new representatives and for whomever might join the bodies, the legislative, the Senate or the House in the future, we got to work on creating avenues, mechanisms of accountability, so that when somebody says something on the floor that they really shouldn't say, something uncouth, that we deal with that and address it.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay Hooper. Same question over to Peter Reed. Right, if you're elected or re-elected, what, if anything, would you personally do to make sure that the climate in the State House is such that your colleagues with marginalized identities are respected, listened to, and safe at work?
Well, I think you start by leading by example, and I think having some cultural sensitivity is important, and being comfortable and knowing people who are gay and transgender, or having friends who are Black or Latino. I grew up my first 12 years living in Latin America and was the kind of the white outcast there. And my parents lived in Africa for a while. I had a chance to visit there. I do have a good sense of being culturally sensitive, and I have members of my family who are gay, and I think that's it's who they are, and we love them just the same. So I think it's something that you have to set the tone. I think it has to come from the top. And I will note that we have some incredibly strong female leadership in the House. I mean, our Speaker, the party leader of both the Democrats and the Republicans are women, and some of our most powerful committees are chaired by women. And I think there's a great deal of equality there. And I think we would be certainly able to welcome anybody else into the fold. I mean, we do have the problem in Vermont that we have a very small population of minorities. And so it's inevitable that they stand out. But I think we have to, I'm more concerned about the situation that was faced by some of our representatives who are harassed in their own communities, as opposed to what was happening in the State House. I think we're a very civil and welcoming place. It may not work as well in Zoom land, and so I hope we can get back together in person soon.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter Reed. Up to Kevin Doering and Randolph Center. How do you feel about what can you do if elected that you can do personally to make sure that the climate in the State House is such that your colleagues with marginalized identities are respected, listened to, and safe?
I think number one, we have to respect the dignity of anyone and everyone. And actually, I would borrow something that Charles stated, that we all come from the same line of blood. We're all created in the same place. We've moved from Africa to Europe to whatever, and different people have had those kinds of exposures. I've been learning. I spent 7 years working on the island of Manhattan, and that is a fairly racially diverse, fairly gay and transgender area. So this was not new to me, and I'm not saying I'm great as a white person or whatever. But if you looked at my lineage, and even in my family, I have two direct family members who've married people who are Black from DC and Cleveland. So I learned a lot from talking with them, because I think what I wrote about, and I wrote this to the Herald, is I want to listen to people of color. I don't think we listen enough. And I would agree with the governor. I think what we're really doing here is he was trying to bring in more people. We've had a federal government that's closed the door on people coming in from away. Our country was built on diversity. It was built on an opening hand. It was built to make meaning for all Americans from wherever they came in the world. And we've closed that door. We should bring in more Somalians and Syrians like we were doing in Vermont. We have communities that want those people. So yeah, let's do that. Let me just share one other thing. I'm a big believer in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I've listened to a lot of his sermons. I've read some of his books. I think we'd be well to get back to that, because I'm so worried where we are now. We're going backwards. We have people talking so loudly about this, where we may lose Brown v. Board of Education civil rights, where we made some progress, and we were making progress. And now we have some schools actually segregating classes. And we need to do this by bringing in more people. I agree with some of the comments that the other colleagues who are running here said about that. Let's be open. Let's do the Vermont way. We respect people. We give them their dignity. And let me just share Dr. Martin Luther King's thing. We will never overcome hatred with hatred. We'll only overcome it with love. And that is the basis for how we move forward. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much, Kevin Doering. Larry Satcowitz, same question. How would you support colleagues who come from, who have marginalized identities, and what would you do to make them feel respected, listened to, and safe at work?
Dylan, I did this one already. You started with me.
Oh, okay. I'm bouncing around. I got 6 of you to juggle with. Okay, so we're gonna come back to you then for the second question here, which would be, how would you propose the legislature help create more affordable housing in your district?
Well, like Peter said earlier, we actually have plans right now to start doing some of that. There's a project that's been in the works for several years now, down behind Town Hall in downtown Randolph off of Salisbury Street. And it's owned by RACDC, and it's been a project which has been long coming. We just recently received a huge grant to work on infrastructure for that property, and that's going to bring us a long way towards being able to complete that project. And there's also a project over on Pearl Street where the smokestack is. We have developers who are interested in developing that property as well. And both of these developments would potentially be mixed housing, where it would be various levels of market rate and subsidized rate housing. But we do have some of that in the works right now. It's pretty exciting, especially since both of these projects are within a very short walk of our downtown. And as everyone around here knows, our downtown could certainly use some more foot traffic. And it seems like we're really, in a lot of cases, very much on a tipping point where even just, a couple of dozen more units of housing downtown, which these two projects would easily provide, could easily, be the difference between certain businesses being prosperous or not. So we're actually pretty excited about these projects going forward in the relatively near future.
All righty, thank you very much, Larry Satcowitz. Same question to Kevin Doering. How would you propose the legislature help create more affordable housing in your district?
Well, we can do budgeting things a little different. We can redistribute. I want to say a thank you to Peter and Larry for what they're doing. It sounds like something really big, because many of the young people I talk with tell me they want to stay in the area and they want to find jobs in the area, and they can't find housing. And they're either staying at home or they can't find an apartment they can afford. So anything we can do to revitalize and improve the downtown areas, which I think factors in with climate change. I think a lot of these issues connect really well. So I don't consider myself an expert in housing. I've been involved with Habitat for Humanity, also been to Guatemala and worked on some construction projects, and been in some disaster relief as well, but I won't talk about that too much. But the point is, we need to do a lot more than we're doing. We're still splitting. The Gulf is splitting in this state. We're having the very wealthy, even people coming in from the pandemic. Some of them are great people, but they're not representing maybe the diversity we want to get capture. It's just market phasing and people coming in and buying more housing, and that's raising the value because people from away. And this happened to me when I came in 2002. The World Trade Center just come down. People were fleeing New York. I had a house under contract almost in Montpelier, and someone came in with a check and wrote it for 50 grand. And I was a poor person with very little income trying to sell a house in Maine and move my family here. And I couldn't do that. That's why I'm glad I ended up in Randolph Center anyway. So no, I'd have to learn a lot and study it, but I would fight hard. One of my key things is affordability and housing for the vulnerable and those who can't afford it. And taxes have driven up way too high here. We need to work on tax rates because that is how landlords pass those costs along. There's so much we can do economically to create affordable housing. And a lot of it's too voluntary spirit work. So thank you to everyone who's working on it. The young people and a lot of the people who are vulnerable and struggling need it.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin Doering. Over to Peter Reed. Peter, what do you propose that the legislature do to create more affordable housing in the district?
Well, I think one of the things that the legislature did a couple of years ago was issue a housing bond that provided kind of seed money for a bunch of projects around the state. And it's something that there's been more pushing for doing that again. It definitely is something that the state treasurer resists because we have to protect the state's credit rating and we don't want to be over indebted. But housing bonds are a way to it's not a gift, it gets repaid, and it's a way to start projects like the Salisbury Square project that we've been working on. Funding a housing project is incredibly difficult. You have to cobble together 4 or 5 different sources, often from federal agencies, some state agencies, and you also have to work very closely together. I think one of the problems that we had in Randolph was that for a period, the town was not really working very well with RECDC in this case in particular, and the whole project was stalled. And once things got back in sync and we were supporting each other, all of a sudden things started to happen. And we're hoping we can actually bring this to reality over the next year or two.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter Reed. Over to Jay Hooper. Jay, what do you propose the legislature do to help create more affordable housing in the district?
Well, going off of Peter's answer, good answer, Peter. That bond that he just mentioned was passed during my first session when me and Ben Jickling were just the new guys. It was a $35 million bond, and frankly, that is not nearly enough. And Peter's absolutely right. This is a big, complicated puzzle, and you've got to line up a number of different ducks, I suppose, to get the money available to create these projects. But in an ideal world, Dylan, in my fantasy world, we could create a program that would utilize this trend of young people who want to buy a rustic house that's maybe a fixer-upper, as they call them. Needs a lot of work and something that they would work on over the course of 10 or 15 years as they raise a family, and just go as they can with what they can afford. If we could sort of model something after the remote worker program, where we try and attract and retain young people who work for out-of-state companies so that the income is coming into the state, a similar model to that one with housing. Maybe some of these houses that are run down would get fixed up, and we could maybe match them dollar for dollar if they go for a net zero presence in whatever town they move into. So I just want to give you a quick example of a recent success story that maybe could fit in with, could be an example of what I'm trying to describe here. And that is the new bike shop in downtown Randolph. If you recall, Dylan, those three houses right next to each other,
10 seconds,
to the south of the laundromat those houses are in rough shape. And now one of them is not only gone, but it's a new business. And
all right, thank you very much, Jay Hooper. And Charlie Russell. How would you propose the legislature help create more affordable housing in your district, in this district?
So if I, win or lose, at least I'm thankful for the opportunity to throw these things out. And I think it's important that people start thinking a little differently. We have so far tonight heard nothing but big government solutions, loans, grants, not grants, loans, bonds, things like that. And we say affordable housing, but we mean cheap homes for poor people. And my attack to this would be, let's create rich people and do that by creating a thriving economy. It's the economy, stupid, as Bill Clinton said. It's the economy. And that's what it is today. It still is. It always is. It's not big government projects. You look in Chicago, where they put all the black people and the poor, they call them poor people, but they're almost all black, into these projects to give them a home. And it's nothing but a cesspool of humanity. And not because of them, it's because of the condition of those homes and the very nature of packing people together like that. That's what happens with affordable housing as well. Get the government off the back of the wage earner, let them earn money. If I got a minute, I had people rent a trailer here at the farm for many, many years, and they were on welfare, paid the rent every month. It was $400, cheap rent. Ronald Reagan became president and made people go back to work. They had to go get a job, but within 1 year, they bought a house because they made money.
All right, thank you very much, Charlie Russell. We're going to head back over to Larry Satcowitz for the next question. What is something that hasn't been mentioned that you would like to address through legislation, and how would you build meaningful coalitions to do so?
All right. one topic which hasn't come up yet is one which is really dear to us here in Randolph and this whole community is VTC. We saw a proposal this past spring to close VTC along with 2 of the other state colleges. Would have been a horrible disaster for our community. These institutions, and especially VTC in our area, they need to be fully funded. We've been denying them money for years. We've been underfunding them for a very, very long time. And it's simply something that we need to make more of a priority for. The money that we invest in these schools, this is all money which will come back to us, in terms of better jobs for local people over long periods of time. If we want to keep our kids here in Vermont, we need to provide them places where they can get a first-rate education. So we need to, provide money for these institutions so that they can hire first-rate teachers, invest in their infrastructure, invest in their technology. And we should be doing so through, public effort, finding money through the budget process, because we can't be raising tuition on these folks. We should be working towards making these institutions as inexpensive as possible so that they can be affordable to anybody who wants to do them and not leave college with mountains of debt. If we can do that, we'll strengthen this whole area and the economy of Vermont as a whole. I think this is a really important issue that we need to work really strongly on over the next several years. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Larry Satcowitz. Down to Kevin Doering and Randolph Center. What do you think, what is something that has not been addressed tonight that you would like to address through legislation, and how would you build meaningful coalitions to do so?
Education, education, education. I don't exercise my First Amendment rights enough. My kids are always asking me to more, and I was out there with the lines with the state college. So I happen to live near VTC and in fact taught there for a few years. So our state colleges, I'm piggybacking a little off Larry, deserve more money. Let me tell you how I want to do it. I'm going to shift a little bit from what Charles said, but it's not all about big government. It's about spending what we have and not raising our taxes any further or even reducing them. I'm going to repeat this, we spend $1.81 billion now for approximately 80,000 public school students. You can do the math quickly. It's coming out around 20,000, give or take, dollars a head. Maine, which I left, is at about 12.5 to 13. I don't think the education here is a lot better. Here's the scoop. We're a rural state. What can we do? We need to look at the holistic budget. We need to look from top to bottom, and that includes the blue ribbon panel that just put out on our most vulnerable, the kids that need the most, the 0 to 5. These are kids, childcare. We haven't talked about that either. I'm going to put that right in education. If we don't get the kids by age 5 as an elementary school teacher, it's a struggle to get them after that. We have high trauma. I've been in over 100 schools in Vermont in the last 3 years. The biggest issue right now is trauma in kids. Why? Parents both working, opioids. I could go on and on and on. What do? Let's take that 1.8 billion. Let's look at that totality. Let's examine what we can do with it. And let's get the 200 million the blue ribbon panel's talking about. Do you know that a single mom, if she has 2 kids, would spend 43% of an average Vermont income just to put her kids in daycare? We can do way better than this. A 2-family wage earner trying to work instead of homeschooling, like Charlie mentioned. But if you want your kids in the public system, you have to spend, again, 40 to 50% of your income just on childcare if you're making average salaries. That's why Vermonters are struggling. It's why Vermonters can't pay their taxes, can't pay their mortgages. It's like it's all combined. So I would be education and budget with those 3 things in mind. We can do better. Linden, a world-class meteorology program.
10 seconds.
We always closed it. We almost closed Linden at a world-class meteorology program. Okay, I went to Rutgers, but I could have gone to Linden. I was accepted there. And Vermont Tech, 98% job placement. Some of these kids get job offers before they leave. We can do so much better for supporting our state colleges too. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Doering over to Peter Reed. Peter, what is something that hasn't been mentioned that you would like to address through legislation, and how would you build meaningful coalitions to do so?
Well, I think one thing that we've touched on briefly, but I think is one of the fundamental underlying problems we have in our state is the access to broadband. And I think during COVID, we've seen from the educational side, we've experienced it in the legislature, and I'm sure all of us have had one instance or another of where the lack of broadband has let us down, either at our end or the other end. It's something that is expensive, and it's not something that the private sector is necessarily going to fix. It it's similar to what happened during electrification back in the day. I was not around then, but I understand it was a commitment on the government's part to make it happen on behalf of the citizens. I'm not necessarily a believer in big government, but there are certain things that the government has to take the lead on for the benefit of its citizens. And I think broadband is one of them. We made some progress with some of the COVID relief funds to make some quick fixes to get some kids hooked up that could easily get hooked up to broadband. The broadband companies in this area have largely been very cooperative and helpful. Some maybe not so much, but it's something that needs a consolidated effort. And I think it's something that the rural members of the legislature, where we are banded together in some form, we have a caucus of rural economic development. And we've talked about this quite a bit. And I think it's something where using that caucus and the relationships there, we could help to drive a solution forward. It will involve funding, but I think it's something that's essential to attract people to work here, to help our students, to help our legislature, to help everybody, especially if now that we're accustomed to using technology this way, and hopefully we won't have to, but it is a very important thing to allow people to telecommute and work remotely, which will bring young people into our state.
All right, thank you very much, Peter Reed. We're ironing out one little technical glitch here. We're going to move on to Charlie Russell. What is something that hasn't been mentioned that you would like to address through legislation, and how would you form meaningful coalitions to do so?
Well, here we go. I'm in full agreement with Peter Reed. Broadband is extremely important. These big cities, Boston, New York, Newark, Buffalo, all over, people are looking for a door to run out of. They want a rural area that they can find safety in, and they want to be able to telecommute. They want to be able to work in their office from home. These people are not low income, they're high income. They are wonderful taxpayers, and they'll be glad to pay Vermont taxes. And they should have broadband available to them so that they can set up their office and expand our economy, because it's the economy, stupid. The economy has got to grow in Vermont, not to bring in millions of people and make it a little New York City, but to make it an affordable place for those of us who are here, and not just keeping our head above water. And yeah, I want to see the economy grow. This is a great way to do it.
All right, thank you very much, Charlie Russell. Over to Jay Hooper. What's something that hasn't been mentioned tonight that you would like to address through legislation, and how would you build a coalition to get that done?
Well, I won't be the first to suggest that we move quickly on this topic, but property tax reform is what we need to dive into when we head back. If I'm part of the legislature that returns to Montpelier, I hope to join Laura Sibilia, the independent representative from Dover. She sits directly to the left or right of Peter on the House floor. She was always a strong advisor and ally to Mr. Jickling, and she and I work closely together as well. But she's constantly alluding to a study that our very own UVM professor Tammy Colby led the research on. She teamed up with a Rutgers University professor named Bruce Baker, and they produced, I guess, I can't tell you how many pages it was, but it was a lengthy document that described the different weights, and I say weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, weights that go into our funding formula for public schools in Vermont. And as you all know, I would hope, our funding formula is centered around property taxation, and it could be probably shifted to income tax based instead. And this study, I think, will be the key to getting to modernizing that funding formula and bringing it into the 21st century, so that we can both simplify the formula and, more importantly, make public school more equitable from town to town, up and down the state of Vermont.
All righty, thank you very much, Jay Hooper. And last but not least, what is the best way for folks to reach you between now and the election? We're going to go right down the line here. We're going to start with Kevin Doering. What is the best way for voters to reach you between now and November?
So email address, which is, I think, in the paper, the Herald, K. Paul Doering, Doering, @gmail.com. My phone number is 802-565-0350. And I will be putting out a page, a website very soon, which I'll direct you to that from there, or it might be noted through Facebook or some other social media. But those are the two keys. You can send me an email. You can call me at your convenience. I am a full-time worker, so it's tough to run for the legislature when you're working full-time. And I know that a lot of people here understand that. But I would call you back as soon as possible if you reach me a weekday.
All righty. Thank you very much, Kevin. Over to Peter Reed. What's the best way for voters to reach you between now and the election?
Well, they can reach me on my email, peterreedvt@gmail.com, or via my website, peterreedvt.com, or they can call me 203-482-4749.
All righty. Thank you very much, Peter Reed. Over to Charlie Russell. What's the best way for voters to get in touch with Mr. Charlie Russell between now and the election?
Yeah, call or text 802-249-7759. Email fisherofmen77@gmail.com.
fisherofmen@gmail.com. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Russell. Over to Jay Hooper. Jay, what's the best way for voters to reach you?
I've always told people that my cell phone is the quickest way to get my attention. And if you don't, you can always text me. Zoe, your compadre at the Herald, she figured that out pretty quick this week. 802-299-6371 is my cell phone. And my home phone number is 728-6659.
All righty. Thank you very much, Jay Hooper. And over to Larry Satcowitz. Last but not least, what's the best way for voters to get in touch with Mr. Satcowitz?
Best way to reach me is email, Larry at my last name, satcowitz.com. So Larry at satcowitz.com. Feel free to give me a call also, 802-249-2280.
All righty. Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you. And that does it for this year's debate for the Orange-Washington-Addison Windsor District. We made it. Thank you to all candidates for participating, and thank you to viewers and voters of the White River Valley. Our next debate between candidates for the Orange 1 District will take place right here next Monday evening at 6 p.m. So tune in then to live.ourherald.com. Keep your eyes peeled for upcoming editions of the Herald for more local election coverage, including questionnaires that candidates from all over the White River Valley have responded to, including Joe Roche, who was unable to be with us tonight. So until next time, stay healthy and wash your hands. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, Dylan.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dylan.
guys.